that's kind of my general approach to that. I think the design approach is I have a framework on complexity and depth. And complexity is a bad thing. Complexity I consider
Mm-hmm.
now, and hear me out, every designer who ever listens to this. It's not to be avoided, but it's a bad thing. And I think this is an
Mm-hmm.
important consideration. Complexity is a tool we use to get depth. Something we use to get mastery loops. It's something we there to get interaction and to get gameplay. Elegance is how well you've done a job of getting the most of the good thing you want out of the complexity you're adding for the least potential complexity. It's an ROI. Adding complexity
Mm-hmm.
is fine, but how is everything lifting the absolute most muscle it can for what I need? And to use this, you start with what is the thing I want, not as what is the cost I spend. If I want, I need this thing I need a really deep talent tree for my ARPG. I need tons. Our game is about character customization, build mastery, and making crazy builds and sharing them in theory crafting. Okay, great. Um, how do we get that? Oh, we could have all these systems do okay job, but not as well as they could, but they're a little simpler. Or I'm Path of Exile.
Yeah.
Just take a sphere grid, bro, and put that out there. Is that simple? No, it's complex. But to get this, is there a better alternative to get this result than that level of complexity? For what they're going for, no.
Yeah.
Therefore, that is an elegant solution for their game and their need to meet a build depth need for players, which is what people go to Path of Exile
Yeah.
for.
Yeah.
um, and so, yeah, go ahead.
I have another example of this where I loved the idea when I heard this. I think it was before I was even in games, that as they were developing Halo, there was this idea of, look, when you're running around a Halo map in PvP or PvE, you have grenades, you have weapons, and you have melee. And we want all of those to have a role. And in a lot of ways, compared to a lot of shooters that were coming out at the time, where you could pick up like 7 to 10 weapons at the same time, you and I, and maybe other people remember, like all the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, everything was bound to like a different weapon that you could pick up at different points in the games, like in Dark Forces or Jedi Knight or anything like that. You had 2 weapons, you had 2 types of grenades, you had melee, and through that, there was so much possibility that they inserted in. But at any given moment, your offensive options were these 3 things. I mean, later on, you get vehicles and you could trick enemies to run off the map at certain points and things like that. But like broadly, this is what you're playing with. And through this lens that you've described, in some sense, much lower complexity than many of its peers, but still all the depth that you wanted to actually make a quite successful game
Yep.
that was, dominant even as a PvP experience for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's a lot to be said about sometimes you get the really beautiful, simple solutions that provide a lot of depth, and those are maximally elegant.
Yep.
Sometimes you get complex solutions that provide really particular types of depth, and those are also elegant, although they are higher cost. And I think that's the
Mm-hmm.
other thing to manage is as you're adding complexity costs. I don't think I did a great job. I'm not proud of the job I did on this during my tenure on League. So
Hmm.
hear that. That when you're adding complexity, it is taking from a budget, and that budget is determinate based on the level of depth you need and the level of new user pain you're willing to accept and cost to reach it. But I think again, that budget isn't spend the fewest amount of dollars possible at all costs. It's get the best value possible at all costs. And lead with what I want to achieve and then find the most elegant way to do it, as opposed to find the simplest thing I can do and then try to make that thing deep. That last thing is an impossible task. You
Mm-hmm.
have to start, unless your game is based on uh, low friction. But I frankly think in the spaces we're talking about for dynastic lifespan live services games, it's a non-option. Even COD, which is probably the most accessible, low friction game series out there in the live services shooter space, is still has a bunch of ear flick moments. It's easy to get into, but it's easy to be frustrated by, right?
Yeah.
And as a result, I think if you were saying, I'm looking at COD, it's unassailable, it's the Iron Giant, it's like if you walked up to an investor and said, I'm going after COD, they would laugh at you. And that's an okay, maybe, initial reaction. If you said, hey, actually, I think that focus on low friction has these 6 weak points that if you shoot them, the whole thing topples over because of this long-term needs of this user base, that's a pitch. Now, maybe it's a good or bad pitch. Maybe it's a good or bad investment. But that is at least like that's a way to apply this of how would you attack that problem. And for them, that's not even a complexity cost that's getting them there, right? That's the easiest game to get into. Is literally pick up, install on your Xbox, and play. Apparently, based on the Sony leak, like there's over 1 million people who literally buy a console and literally only play COD on it. Like it's that level of like broad market appeal.
Yeah.
What are those players' problems? I bet they have stuff. I bet the deep players have stuff. Do you have deep players? These are all the questions I would want to ask about that. So when I think we talk about the complexity cost, or we talk about that growing cruft of inaccessibility that kind of like grows on live service games, I think it's important to factor, and it's important to have solutions for, like I said, the external modes or alternative experiences or places to get new user acquisition. But we even see in games that are built to be as accessible as they can, COD and Fortnite, that is not the whole story of the problem of why these games will lose players, not continue to grow market share, eventually reach 100% penetration anyway. There's other things at play. And I think, again, I'm the most irritating guy in the world when I say this. It's about player needs. Are my needs still being served well? Whatever it takes.
Yeah.
My needs aren't being served well? Be ready for vulnerability and attack. And as a current existing live service game, if you are an incumbent or you are you're at or past the mid-market failure state and you're established, making sure you're on top of meeting those player needs and not letting others come and eat your lunch. Don't rely only on the friction of switching costs to keep you safe. Continue to make sure that if other people want to come try to meet their needs, they're working uphill.
Okay, so I'm going to roll a hand grenade in.
Yeah.
But it's one you're familiar with, so I don't think it's actually going to blow up in your face. But here's the hand grenade. Cool. But Ryan, which players? I have a bunch of players, and, I've got a bunch of players that play mostly casually, and in fact, that's the largest number of them. And they seem to like the game, and when I release new things, sometimes they buy skins, and then I've got a hyper-engaged group of players that seems to play a lot. They're pretty good at it. They spend a lot of time in it. Maybe they have teams, and they're always playing together in social environments or whatever. And then I've got my elite, like, top end, and then I've got my pros, like the people who are doing this in esports leagues that just emerged or that we supported or whatever it was. Who am I serving? If you lead teams in game or software development and you're tired of wasteful and unreliable estimation, I've built an online course just for you. It's called Advanced Estimation for Game and Software Development, and it's a self-paced course with over 15 hours of content, real-world examples, and tools you can start using right away. Estimation doesn't have to be a morale-draining mess. Planning doesn't have to feel unrealistic and contrived. You can do better, and this course will help. Early access is now open with lifetime access and a big launch discount, but there's limited seats at this price point. Check it out at this URL or in the show notes below.